Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Fillon and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to talk about Jackson Holliday, who has been hitting the cover off the ball at AAA Norfolk, discuss his recent surge, and whether and how he could fit into the Orioles' plans for the second half of the season. We'll also quickly break down the Orioles as they enter the early portion of their post-All-Star break slate. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bonus of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. And as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new, or in this case, returning member of our Patreon community. And with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, just want to welcome back Joe Adams into the fold. Happy to see him come back as a patron and re-enter the Discord. We missed him over there. So, yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
And as a reminder, you can sign up for our Patreon community for as little as $3 a month as a paying member. At the $5 and $10 levels, have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. We also update our top 50 prospects list monthly for patrons, and patrons of any paying level can access exclusive Discord channels on our Discord community. So you're going to want to check that out. And now we'll get into the main topic of tonight's episode, which is Jackson Holliday, who had an excellent weekend in Norfolk series against Nashville, going 4 for 8 over 3 games played with 2 homers and 2 walks. And this continues a trend in which Holliday has been scorching at the plate since coming off the IL in late June. He's appeared in 17 games and is slashing .316, .494, .614 in that span while walking 20 times and striking out just 15. He's had 18 hits total during that time period, 11 of which have been for extra base hits. And this is really the best that Holliday has looked at the plate since the Orioles optioned him back to Norfolk after a sluggish debut in the major leagues earlier this season. With the Orioles now in the post-All-Star break portion of their schedule and Holliday hitting the ball well at AAA, the question comes up, is Holliday closer to returning to the major leagues? But we'll focus first on his performance of late. Nick, since Holliday has come off the IL, it's been apparent that he looks really comfortable at the plate. What have you been seeing from him over the last 2 weeks or so?
A lot of good baseball. Also good to see him back at second base already, even if they're just easing him back in. I think that first game, he got removed early, and I saw a couple people freaking out. He's easing his way back into playing in the field after the injury, but it's happening sooner than I thought it would. They made it seem like it would be weeks of him just DHing, and it was like a week and a half or so. But yeah, you rattled off the numbers, great numbers, OPS and over 1,100. Walks are actually up if you look at his numbers just in AAA, no MLB numbers, but just his AAA numbers before the injury versus after the IL stint. Walks are up a little bit, strikeouts are down a little bit. He's got a 186 WRC plus. That's fantastic. The 3 homers are also good to see. 2 of those did come on Friday when the Tides returned, when all minor league baseball returned from their little break as well. But like I went back to that Baseball America article that they did a couple weeks ago, and they dove into the Kobe Mayo breakdown, and we talked about that article. But they also mentioned Holliday and did the same thing on a much smaller scale. And I don't know if we talked about that or not on that episode. I was mostly focusing on Kobe Mayo, but like with Holliday, the 2 things they highlighted in that specific article on things he needed to fix, some holes in his game, were struggles against velo up in the zone. And then Friday night, he went up against Joe Ross. In case you were wondering, Joe Ross still plays baseball. And like, make any Joe Ross jokes you want about how he's not that good of a ball player. But he does have like almost 500 MLB innings under his belt. But one of those home runs Holliday hit was actually a 94 mile per hour fastball up in the zone. So like that's obvious. You want to see that more consistently, but like that was good to see. And I like watching the prospect hitters, the young guys like Holiday, how they fare against the Joe Ross types, because like Joe Ross may not have the stuff to beat Jackson Holliday and these younger guys, but like they can outsmart these rookies. I feel like pretty much any night. So I like seeing how the young guys fare, and he fared pretty well, getting 2 home runs off of him. But it seemed like the end zone contact rate and velo against fastballs up in the zone, specifically against right-handed pitchers, were 2 of Holliday's weaknesses. And I've been kind of checked out this weekend, and then got slammed at work today. So this was a quick and dirty search. So somebody is going to have to fact check me on this. But I believe I looked at, again, from pre-IL to post-IL, just in AAA, and Jackson Holliday's like launch angle on Baseball Savant, and up in the zone, it's I don't really see any changes there, except it was like, I think before the break, it was on pitches up and in, he was driving those balls in the air. And then since he returned from the IL, it's been the complete opposite, where it's balls up and away that he's driving in the air. Again, someone will have to fact check me on that search on Baseball Savant that I did real quickly, about 10 minutes or so. But we don't have access to a lot of those better numbers that the organization does. And hopefully he is improving in those 2 areas. But, just this weekend, it looked like he was certainly trending in the right direction in those 2 specific areas. So it's good to see. He's a 20-year-old kid making adjustments and improving. So love to see it.
Absolutely. And it's just funny, as we near the trade deadline, how underrated Jackson Holliday is at this point, just because I feel like 36 plate appearances in the major leagues have made him go from like best prospect in baseball, or at least one of them, to fans are like, Tarek Skubal for Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo. Like the trade rumors that like the Orioles are really going to trade Jackson Holliday in the next week or so, just because he struggled in the majors, is silly, because he's been phenomenal since going back down. He's got more walks and strikeouts. That's what Jackson Holliday does. He's going to have an incredible walk rate. He's not going to strike out a ton. He's got a great hit tool, and he's still getting adjusted to this level of baseball. But, I mean, I think people are sleeping on his power still. He's got a, ISO of 220, which is pretty good for a guy who can't really hit for power. He's got 24 doubles, 10 home runs, 8 stolen bases, only been caught 1 time. He's back playing second base. He's doing everything that the organization could ask of him. He struggled in the majors when he came up with the swing and miss, especially up in the zone, but that's not happening anymore since he came down. The leg kick is less pronounced. He'll be back this year, and he'll be on the playoff roster in October.
There was a really good article recently in The Athletic written by Cody Stavenhagen, and it talked about how the gap between AAA and the majors is growing. And I bring this up because I think it's relevant in Holliday's case. Some of the points made in that article are that fastballs are not as good and they're not thrown as hard in AAA as they are in the majors. Hitters in AAA also don't see as many sliders as hitters in the major leagues. And when they do, those sliders tend to be a little bit slower than what they see in the major leagues. And for anyone that has not checked out this article yet, I would encourage you to go over and do so over at The Athletic. But keeping that in mind, and it is something that we have seen in the last couple of years because of those factors, and something else that's mentioned in that article, which is the automated ball strike system. We've talked a lot on this show about how that has tilted the International League in the last couple of years towards hitters. So I think we know with the data that's available that AAA is a much more hitter-friendly environment right now than the major leagues is. And with that in mind, how do you guys reconcile what you see from Holliday's stats versus whether or not he's actually ready to come back to the majors?
Hard to say, but I mean, if you look at Gunnar Henderson, who obviously MVP caliber player right now, Jackson Holliday's numbers at AAA are very similar to what Gunnar was doing. And obviously, if it's a little more offensive oriented now, then take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But Holliday's doing it at a younger age, and I still think he's an elite prospect. Maybe he doesn't take that next level at the major league level like Gunnar has. Maybe he's more on-base oriented than slugging oriented, but those guys playing up the middle together the next 5, hopefully 10 years, it's going to be a lot of fun for Orioles fans. So keeping receipts of all these people saying trade Jackson Holliday right now.
Yeah, so you can take his numbers with a small grain of salt, but not enough salt to taste. But like, I go back to the age, like Bob referenced there. He's still only 20 years old, and it's what he does well. It's okay. He's not making enough contact in the zone, but he's not chasing. That's huge for me, in my opinion. I'm no hitting expert, but I think that stands out. If he's like flailing at pitches and Chase has this enormous chase rate, it's below MLB average chase rate against lefties and righties. So when he does make contact, it's good contact. He's hitting the ball hard. He's just not hitting it in the air as much right now. And then he's not chasing pitches. And he's doing all of this at, I don't know, what is it, like 4.5? I have to pull up the age gap there, AAA, like what the average AAA player is right now. He's like, 4.5 years younger, 5 years younger than the average AAA player. Again, going up against, the quality of stuff isn't as good, and it's deteriorating, it seems like, over the last couple of years. But it's still like, you go up against a guy like Joe Ross who has 500 MLB innings under his belt, and you hit 2 home runs off of him. Like, you take note of that. I just think that if it's a matter of making contact in the zone and lifting the ball, but you're already such a disciplined hitter, I take a lot of comfort in that, and that it's going to take time he's got to see more of that quality stuff, which is not going to happen at the AAA level. But once he sees more of that quality stuff, he got beat down in the major leagues. He failed, probably, like a lot of people said, for the first time in his entire life. He probably failed at baseball. He went back down to the minor leagues and then got hurt. I don't know what his injury history is, but I don't think it's pretty extensive. And so now to see him hitting better than before even, and keeping that discipline, I'm remaining pretty optimistic about what he can do in the major leagues once it clicks. He's just got to see that better stuff for more than 2-3 weeks.
And like Nick said, not a hitting coach, but yeah, if you're not chasing, to me, someone with his abilities at his age, swing and miss in the zone seems like a very fixable or just developed tool. Like, he'll develop that as he gets older and more reps against the quality of pitching at the major leagues.
When you look at the Orioles lineup right now across the board, I think second base is a weak spot offensively that does jump out at you. And it would seem that if the Orioles want to try to remedy that problem, they can do so internally. They don't have to go out and trade for a second baseman to try to get more offensive production, which is why, frankly, I don't think we're hearing a whole lot about it leading up to the trade deadline. Now, to the extent that it is a problem when you have one of the best lineups in baseball, it's debatable. But let's say the Orioles do want to try to plug in someone from AAA to get more offensive production out of their infield, be able to move guys around a little bit. There's seemingly one of 3 or possibly 2 or 3 ways they could go. They could bring Holliday back up, get him regular playing time at second base, and try to do what they did for him earlier this season. They could bring Connor Norby back up, or they could bring up Kobe Mayo and decide that Jordan Westberg is going to play second base more often down the stretch. When you consider those 3 scenarios, which one do you guys think would be the most likely?
Personally, it's all 3 for me. I mean, if I had it my way, Kobe would be third base, first base. Jackson would be second base. Connor Norby would be a Hayes replacement. It's all right there for me. But we know that's not going to happen. We know they like their veterans, and they're not going to give up on players unless there's, trades that they can find with, whether it's the Braves who need outfield help or the Mariners who need bats of any sort whatsoever, the Marlins who could use a shortstop. Anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. So for me personally, I'm really frustrated that Kobe Mayo's not up already, honestly. I mean, he's been playing a lot at first base, so obviously we know it's happening soon. They're not going to wait till September, I don't think, to make that move. To me, something's not right with Mountcastle right now. He's struggling. He just he's not pulling the ball at all lately. He just seems out of it when I don't know if it's his knee, if the vertigo is flaring up, but something seems off. So I think Mayo would be playing some first base here in a perfect world. But I think what's going to happen is I think Norby will be a September expanded rosters when you get those 2 extra players. I think he could be a guy that gets one of those spots. Holliday, I mean, Mateo has been playing a lot of second base. Basically, whatever position Westberg's not playing is the weakest link. And Ramon Empire, as Vivek points out, he's been playing pretty well of late, but still, to me, that's an easy upgrade. So we'll give our predictions when Holliday will be up, but I think that's the inevitable move for second base at the end of the season, into the playoffs, and then into the future.
You mentioned Mountcastle, and I was going to bring him up as well. Like, all right, you've got. We're not assuming trades right now, right? With this conversation on what you do with them, it's extremely difficult. Jorge Mateo, it's been bad lately. I said on this show that when he went on the IL with the concussion, I was afraid that this was going to ruin his rhythm and like what was going to happen when he returned. And actually, it was, shout out Matt Kremnitzer actually tweeted this morning the numbers, so I didn't have to look them up for this to make this point. Mateo before the IL stint had a 106 WRC plus and 128 plate appearances. Since then, in 79 plate appearances, he has a 58 WRC plus. The speed, we know why he's on the roster, the speed and defense. I kind of agree that the speed's kind of useless if you can't get on base. He could be that late game substitution. He could be an impact player for you there. Ramon Arias, I don't know like what he's particularly going to bring over these other guys. But the wild card here for me is Mountcastle. And I don't want to jump on the guy just because, he's struggling right now and it's the trade deadline and we're eager to see prospects come up. But we've talked about this before a couple of times in the offseason when looking ahead 2-3 years down the road. And we've kind of always questioned how long is Ryan Mountcastle going to be around on this roster when you've got Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, who we assumed probably long-term could have been like a first base DH option, especially if Santander is going to stick around and you're going to keep Kjerstad around. But like Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn could be around
Samuel
for another
year.
It goes on and on. Like, I'm concerned about Mountcastle as well. Like over the last month, the calendar month, he has a team worst 45 WRC plus. Jorge Mateo is 46. He's hitting 216. He has 1 home run in the last month. He's near the bottom in hard hit rate. I love the guy, but like I almost wonder if there's another team calling about Mountcastle. Like, could the Orioles move Mountcastle at the deadline? Then Mayo can come up and play first base. Kjerstad has played a decent amount of first base too. Another way to get his bat in the lineup there. They're both very inexperienced at first base. You're definitely taking a hit defensively because Mountcastle has been pretty solid over there. But like, there's going to be a learning curve with those two guys. But could Mountcastle bring back some pitching? And like, and for Mountcastle's sake, if he goes to a park where that left field wall doesn't destroy him, it's clearly frustrating him. And it is clearly like the numbers don't lie. Like, if anyone's been impacted by that wall more than anyone else, it's Ryan Mountcastle. If he's free from that to just be himself, unleash his poolside power, which he has completely abandoned. Bob referenced that. I didn't write down the exact numbers. His pool percentage is like in the teens when it was in like 40 something percent. That's non-existent now. It's like, is he trying to avoid the wall? Is it all in his head now? I don't know. But maybe like a change of scenery, new venue could probably do wonders for him and get the Orioles pitching back potentially. And the Orioles could turn to Mayo, open up another spot there. How likely is that? I don't know, but like it could be an option.
I mean, Cincinnati, if I'm Mountcastle, that's where I want to go. There's these rumors that they're selling here in the next week or so. Ryan Mountcastle for Frankie Montas and Nick Martinez. I don't know. Be good for him.
I kind of view Mountcastle the same way that I viewed Austin Hayes when we were having these conversations last year, which is that when you're winning at the major league level and you have a guy who seems to mean a lot to the clubhouse, as Hayes did and as Mountcastle does, you're not going to move him in the middle of a pennant race. It just isn't going to happen. I mean, we saw a few years ago what happened when the Brewers traded Josh Hader, and he wasn't pitching particularly well when they traded him. The Brewers sunk after that. And to what extent Hader being dealt had to do with that, you could debate. But, we saw plenty of evidence that it really threw things off in the clubhouse. I don't think the Orioles are going to want to do that mid-season. Now, with that said, off-season, completely fair game. And I've been saying for a few years now that I think the Orioles have been looking ahead to when Mountcastle is going to be arbitration eligible and trying to figure out who can we line up behind him. And now they have possibly Heston Kjerstad. They have Kobe Mayo. They could decide to just pick up Ryan O'Hearn's player option, make him the primary first baseman next year. There's a lot of ways they can go in the offseason. I just don't see them doing it in season. As for how I kind of see this coming together, I get the sense that Mayo is going to get the call before Holliday does. For no reason other than that, I think the right-handed power bat really is needed right now. And you've talked about Mountcastle slipping. Jordan Westburg's hitting pretty well right now, but Mountcastle is slipping. Mateo is not hitting well. If you could just throw in another right-handed bat that gives you some power, even if Mayo only hits 240 to 250 the rest of the way, you'll take it. That's kind of where I see him having the advantage over Holliday.
I think it's two things that we don't know, and we can't know unless somebody told us and we asked the right people. It's going back to Jackson Holliday. Is he making those adjustments? Do the internal metrics, do the data the Orioles are looking at, is he improving in what they saw where his weaknesses in the major leagues when in his first call up? Is he improving in those areas? And if so, could he be that potential option? Versus Mayo, it's how does the organization view his defense? We know the spring training piece, that's a spring training piece. That is what it is. But realistically, behind closed doors, what's the conversation about his defense? I know how Twitter views his defense. They think he's the worst third baseman to ever play the game of baseball. There's somewhere in there is how the organization truly views his defense, and that we don't know. And if they think it's better, I made this point the last time we were on, I know he played first base a lot more this weekend, but it's they didn't move him to the outfield at all. He played a lot of third base this year. I don't think the organization is as down on his defense at third base. And if they aren't, then I think it makes it a little bit easier. And yeah, Kobe Mayo would get the call before Holliday. I think those are just two things that we don't know the answers to, and it makes I'm thinking about this a little bit more difficult on trying to guess on where they would go here. But
yeah, I don't think it's realistic that Mountcastle is traded in season. Same with someone was asking me what's the most you would give up for Tariq Skubal, which we might get to in the mailbag, but my answer there was probably not also realistic because it included a guy that's an all-star and playing every day for an Orioles, and contenders, they don't do that, and the Orioles are very conservative when it comes to subtracting from a contending team in season. So yeah, I lost the plot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they would move Mountcastle either. As we're just spitballing because we got nothing else to talk about. We got three days of minor league baseball to review. There's one big thing happened. That's about it. But there are a lot of different options, and it's just I do think Mountcastle can even forget about can Mountcastle figure this thing out, right? Or can Mullins figure this thing out? Whoever figure it out. This team is still playing really good baseball and winning a lot of baseball games. So yeah, you don't want to rock the ship too much. Do you want to attack pitching and add a ton of pitching to this roster? Absolutely. But with the lineup, I think it's a little bit more delicate because we've seen this team hit some funks and it's been bad. They limped their way into the All-Star break. But at the same time, this team's set up pretty nicely as is. You don't need to make sweeping big changes to the lineup for this to be a World Series contending lineup. Pitching, different story, but yeah, only a couple more days till we find out for sure.
I just hope a team likes Hayes and Arias enough to give us something for him.
And we're going to have more
opportunities. Sorry.
We are going to have more on the trade deadline later this week as part of our mailbag episode, and it's worth noting we're recording this on Monday night, only 8 days from the trade deadline, so we're going to have a lot of coverage about the trade deadline leading up to that, including in our episode later this week on the mailbag. I'm going to wrap up this episode, though, with this question about Holliday, because I think it's worth pointing this out in this day and age where Rookie of the Year wins and service time factor into draft pick compensation. By my count, Holliday had 15 days on the active roster during his first stint. He had 34 at-bats during that time period. So in other words, he's currently 96 at-bats and or roughly 30 days away from losing rookie eligibility. That means that if the Orioles called him up now, and he spent the rest of the year in the majors, he would definitely lose rookie eligibility before the year ended, not eligible for rookie of the year in 2025. Take that out of the equation entirely. Is that a factor for the Orioles in your mind, and should it be?
I think it is a factor. I think, especially for Holliday, because with Mayo, I don't think it is, nor should it be. I think you get him up here. Hopefully soon you get him the experience to get ready for the playoffs, to be a big part of that. For Holliday, personally, I don't think it necessarily should be, because I don't know, same thing, let him get adjusted and all that. But for me, I think September 2nd at home, start of a homestand against the White Sox. It's 28 days left in the season at that point, and I think you manage his at bats so he gets like 94 at bats in 28 days, and he'll be like the Colton Cowser of next year, where he's eligible for like a game or two, and you can try to get that draft pick like Gunnar did.
Yeah, and like as long as there's no major injuries, like you can keep him down. You don't have to worry about that. As long as you keep winning ball games and this offense keeps producing just enough to win those ball games, even when it's not clicking on some nights. Like if Connor Norby isn't traded, then he's still on the 40-man roster. You can also bring him up to fill in some of those at bats, so you don't have to bring up Holliday. And even if you think he's ready, you're like, it's not a necessity that he has to come up. And we can also, like Bob said, we can also bring him up at the end of the year. He could still play in the playoffs, right? Do the playoffs don't count. So yeah, we can still come up, get some extra time, get some extra at bats. And if we think he's going to be a productive piece for the playoffs, we add him to the playoff roster. If not, he doesn't make the playoff roster. Oh, well, he got another taste. He's up next year, opening day, starting second baseman, potential rookie of the year again next year. So I imagine it is under pretty heavy consideration when they're making these decisions.
Yeah, I would like to think that whatever decision they're going to make is going to be in service of what gives them the best chance to have the American League East wrapped up and be successful in the playoffs. But whether or not Holliday is going to be that much of a difference maker is debatable. So I do kind of fall on the side of them doing what Bob suggested, which is waiting until early September to bring him up, and probably playing him in a platoon role that's going to keep his total at bats for the season below 130. And then he'll be rookie of the year eligible going into 2025. And I'll throw out one last question here from Vivek. Which player will have the most impact in your lineup, Mayo or Holliday? So let's just take that as the Orioles roster right now without much change to it other than whatever player you're getting rid of to bring up Holliday or Mateo. Which one of those two has more impact?
In general, Mayo. But because Holliday would be replacing mostly Mateo, I think that might make a bigger difference as far as, if Mayo's in for more of a Mountcastle Arias replacement, it's a little less, improvement to be made there. So both?
I just think it's Mayo. I think that ceiling is massive. Defense aside, just look at the bat. Like, he doesn't hit cheapies. I don't think that wall is going to bother him as much as some people think it will. I agree with the point I see a lot of other people make. He could be that right-handed power bat that provides a jolt to this lineup that it kind of desperately needs. I don't know. And we broke that. Go back and look through that Baseball America article, the StatCast standouts from a couple of weeks ago, and just you look at his patience. You look at fastballs up in the zone. We talked about how that was a struggle for Holliday. That's a big weakness for him. That's what Kobe Mayo feasts on. You give him fastballs up in the zone, they're gone. He waits. He waits and waits and waits. He does not chase pitches. He's going to when he gets up to the major leagues, right? He's going to face better quality stuff like we just mentioned. He's going to have his struggles, but he is also an extremely patient, well-disciplined hitter. He waits for you to make a mistake and then he punishes it. I just, that ceiling with that bat is ginormous.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Mayo would be more of a difference maker in the lineup right now because of what that right-handed power can do. And we're going to break down a lot more things, Orioles, in our mailbag segment later on this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline. We're going to talk about the draft and a whole lot more. So you're going to want to check that out. In the meantime, you can find us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com, and you can sign up to become a member of our Patreon community for as little as $3 a month. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
When you protect your corn and soy crops with Miravis Neal fungicide, you'll start seeing a lot more than just cleaner and greener fields. You'll get longer-lasting disease control, better plant health benefits, less plant stress, higher potential yield, and increased ROI potential. Ask your Syngenta retailer about Miravis Neo and start seeing more green in your fields, on your yield monitor, and in your wallet. Always read and follow label instructions.
Hey, it's Michelle Beadle. That's right, the Michelle Beadle. You're welcome. You love talking about sports. I love talking about sports. You know the only thing cooler than talking about sports? Sports! And right now, all your favorite sports are on Sirius XM. I'm talking every NFL game, every game from the NBA, NHL, MLB, every NASCAR race, golf major conference college sports, and all the top games in the WNBA. If it gets your heart pumping, it's on Sirius XM. To start your free trial of Sirius XM today, visit SiriusXM.com/believe.